If you want to grow tomatoes without disease and you don't want to use any chemicals along the way, well, this video is for you because I am going to show you how I manage my tomatoes through the act of pruning in order to reduce disease across the board. Now, we are going to be doing some in-ground tomatoes like this over here, but I also have a crazy tomato jungle in a raised bed that we're going to be tackling. And after 5 days, I'm going to come back and show you all the plants, show you how they responded, and we'll see if I missed anything from that initial pruning. The first tomatoes that we are going to be dealing with are these guys over here, which is my Florida weave section. I have slicers in the front, and in the back there I have some cherry tomatoes. Now, the cool thing that I've seen right now is that there's basically no disease present. So let's take a closer look and I'll tell you exactly why I want to prune them. Like I said, I am very pleased with the progress of these tomatoes so far. They don't seem to have any disease present, not even powdery mildew. Even on the backside here, which gets a little bit less sun, they're just looking overall quite good. Now, I'm sure if we take a look at some of these lower leaves, let's actually do that right now. Start to see, oh yeah, there's a little bit of damage there. You can see some of that browning on the leaf. So you are starting to see some sort of disease or issue crop up. This is why it's important to continuously prune your tomato leaves. If you leave these older leaves for too long, eventually they're going to suffer. They're going to get some sort of disease, maybe they'll get some pest pressure, maybe they'll get bit by something, and that is where the vectors for disease come in. So for me, my personal preference on dealing with tomato disease is to just be very vigilant and proactive by pruning these tomatoes as soon as you possibly can. Actually, down here, I'm seeing some damage on this leaf as well, and maybe even some signs of powdery mildew. So that is why it's important to remove the older leaves. If you go up, you'll notice that the leaves are very healthy because they haven't had a chance to be affected by any of the disease. So removing any old leaves is my preference at all times. What I like to do is I'll look for this fruit cluster here. You can see that there's a little tomato there being set. So essentially now that I know that there's fruit set there, actually I even see some down there, what I'll want to do is remove any of the leaves beneath that. That is going to guarantee that I'm removing the oldest leaves, the ones most likely to carry disease. So let's get in there and start pruning. In terms of pruning, these tomatoes over here will definitely be the easiest of the bunch that we tackle today because I've been trellising these for a while, so I've actually had my eye on them, keeping close look on them to make sure they're not overgrown in a certain way, and just kind of being on top of them in general. So now we've removed all of the leaves beneath the actual fruit that's been set, and the only other thing that I like to do after that is just take a look around, make sure that I'm not missing anything obvious. You're already down here, so you might as well take a peek. And I'm not seeing anything concerning here. There's no signs of disease and really no pests. So now we're good to move on to the next one. So now let's take a look a little bit closer so you could see exactly what I'm looking for. Here's a fruit cluster. There are no leaves beneath it, but clearly some of these leaves are old and they are showing signs of disease. So this leaf right here has aphids on it, as well as patches of disease that have likely even been spread by the aphids, which is why it's so important that you stay on top of this. Because if you let this run away from you, the disease will simply take over your plant, and then it's going to be much harder to deal with later on. So what I'm doing here, since I don't have a fruit cluster up here that's actually developed, unlike this one, I'm just removing anything that seems like it's too crowded, it's crossing over, maybe there's signs of aphids on it. So I want to get those leaves out of here no matter what. So for me, that's pretty good. Since the tomatoes didn't have any major disease really, powdery mildew is just something that's in the air basically. I am going to be composting them. If they were covered in severe like wilting or bacterial disease, then I would put them in the green bin. But these leaves are quite healthy. Now the thing that isn't healthy is my compost, because I am very short on browns right now, and this is a very wet green pile. So that's a problem for another day. So let's get over to the other tomato section. So one thing I'm going to be doing actually before we prune those tomatoes is clean these up a little bit. I don't honestly like cleaning them between each individual plant because honestly, these plants are right next to each other. They're literally touching each other in that Florida weave section. So I'm like, what am I going to prevent from one to the other when they're already making contact? But if I'm moving to a different patch like I am now, then I will actually wash this off with a little bit of Dr. Bronner soap here, and then I'll give it a splash of 91% isopropyl alcohol to neutralize any potential disease that it could transfer. We're over here on the next tomato bed, which is in need of a lot of work. I totally overdid this bed. I should not have put so many tomatoes in here. I'll show you in a second, but there is definitely signs of powdery mildew in there. So let's take a look and see what we could do. So this bed a little bit happened by accident. It's because the raccoons kept digging it up, and I got so frustrated in the end that I was like, you know what, screw it. I'm just putting my tomatoes back in here no matter what. So what happened is I decided to put all these determinate tomatoes, and that is what you see over here is a sea of determinate tomato action. And then I was like, you know what, my whole plan this entire time was to put indeterminate tomatoes here. So I had to do it. I know I shouldn't have crowded it this hard. I don't even know how many tomato plants are in here. This is a 4x8 short birdies bed, and it's just brimming with tomatoes. It's going to be quite the crazy harvest from this one bed alone. I actually can't wait. But let me show you some of the problems that I'm seeing. So first of all, I think it's time to actually harvest this guy. That's definitely ready to go, the last of my cauliflower. But down here, you could see that's powdery mildew city over here. All that white patchiness, you could see it on the stems back there. You could see it on the leaves over here. Now these are determinate tomatoes. Actually, this one's so bad, it's just brittle at this point. So these are determinates. So we will be doing a heavy cleanup. I am going to have a hard time showing you all that cleanup. But the idea here is that anything that is receiving 0 light right now, so right now it's about 1 o'clock, maybe 2 o'clock. And if it's not getting any sun down here, then there's no reason to keep it. There's no way it's contributing to the plant. It's only going to sit down here and suffer and get more and more disease until eventually it spreads all the way up into the plant. So our goal today is to only leave this top canopy of leaves essentially, and everything basically beneath here needs to go. So it's going to be quite a substantial pile. I'll go ahead and just show you the pile at the end, because like I said, this is literally a jungle. It's going to be hard to get in here, but I'll show you what it looks like afterwards as well, because I think it's hard to actually picture what this pruning really looks like unless you see it before and after. So here's another little snapshot from this angle of the before. And then here are my hands before, because if you know anything about pruning tomatoes, you're going to end up with dirty hands. So I'll see you in a little bit with some stickier fingers than I have now. So here are the hands after the pruning, a little bit of brownness, not too bad, but this is the pile that we ended up with. So pretty decent amount of powdery mildew present here. Actually, there's a great example right here. If you look at the front of the leaves where you normally are looking, this looks like a perfectly healthy, quite green, nice looking leaf. But if you look closely at the stem here, you'll start to see these little patches. So if I see that on a stem, what I'll do is I'll flip the leaf over, take a look at it, and over here, if you take a look at that leaf, it's covered in that white powdery substance, the stem as well. That is the powdery mildew spores, and it's only going to get worse from here. They really thrive in humid, warm conditions, which is what we're heading into as we get into the end of May here. So very important that you remove these as soon as you see them. And actually right now, you can already tell just how much more clearance there is underneath these tomatoes. Even right now with the wind blowing through, you could see that the leaves are now actually moving, even on the inside, even all the way there in the back. So that's exactly what we're looking for. Let me do a little walk around so you could just see the difference here. So here are the indeterminates on the front. I could probably actually even remove more from them. And actually one thing I've noticed is that these are growing much more vigorously than the ones I have in ground over there. So I think it has to do with the raised bed and the fact that the soil is so much warmer due to the raised bed being elevated out of the ground. Now on this side, let's take a look. Even from here, you could tell it looks a lot less busy, at least to me it does. And if I take a stance back here, again, you could see underneath now. So that is what we're looking for. We want clearance, we want light to hit these lower leaves. So take a look at that leaf. That leaf actually has some powdery mildew on it, but even now it's getting light, which is fantastic. I will go ahead and remove it since I see the powdery mildew on it, but that is what we're looking for. If a leaf is not getting any light, it is useless, it is contributing nothing to your plant. It is only going to be a potential disease vector in the future. So the next step here is to follow up on these plants in about a week. They'll relax now that I prune them, they'll start setting more growth, and it'll be a perfect opportunity to come back through and look for any leaves that you might have missed, or leaves that might develop more powdery mildew after the pruning. It's been 5 days since we've done our pruning, so I figured let's take a look at all these tomatoes, see how they responded to the pruning, and whether or not we missed any disease or any leaves that we should have removed last time. Right off the bat, you could already see that they've put on a lot of new growth. All this upper section here is basically new. It's really leafed out a lot more aggressively from the pruning that we did. Every time you prune, you sort of release some sort of nutrient lock in the plants. When you remove the leaves, the plants decide, oh, actually I need more leaves, and they start to produce more. And that is how you get continuous healthy growth, by actually pruning your plants. If you were to just leave them, the lower leaves are sort of like baggage and all that disease starts to build up, eventually working its way up the tomato plants, which is why it's so crucial that you do prune your tomatoes on a regular basis. Now, if we take a look at some of these leaves here, so let me go down here. There's a particularly low tomato leaf, and we want to see if there's any signs of disease. Now I don't see anything. I don't see any powdery mildew. A little bit of bird poop there, but that's fine. That's organic fertilizer. So again, we're checking the undersides of the leaves because that is where disease tends to hide. So that side we're good. Let's take a look at this one over here. No disease. So at this point, I could probably wait and do another pruning maybe in another 3 or so days once these have started to grow even more. But even from the last session, these plants have really reached far beyond their trellis support. So right here is the last string that I have. And there's like a branch over here that's like 2 feet past that. So they do need some tie up, but overall, pruning looks fantastic. I don't see any major issues that we need to resolve right now. I just need to do another tie-up and then we'll do another pruning at the end of this week. So honestly, the Florida Weave section doesn't surprise me. There wasn't really any major issues to begin with on that one, but the one that I'm more curious about checking for updates on are the ones that are in this raised bed. Because I showed you guys, this was quite the tomato jungle. Underneath, it was full of disease. So let's take a look now. We've done some major pruning from last time. And here is the raised tomato bed. Overall, first impressions, it looks amazing. Tons of new growth, lots of dark green leaves. Everything's looking really, really quite healthy. Now let's take a look underneath. That's where the real problem is. Of course, some of this patchiness is old powdery mildew. I'm not able to get rid of it at this point. It's just part of the stem, but it's not really spreading as much anymore. Like right here, you could see it transitions over to a clean stem. Now down here, it was really bad before, and it still is because I didn't remove the plant. There's no way to really remove all this material down here without actually physically removing the plant. So what I am seeing though, is that the leaves up top are not actually very bad with powdery mildew. There is a little bit of powdery mildew like this one, but this leaf is not getting any sun. It's not getting much wind, so I should actually just remove this entire leaf when I get a chance. So right here, it looks really great. I'm actually really pleased with this. What you're looking at is this light yellow-green color. It's almost like a chartreuse. That is all new growth. So when you see this color here, this is a new leaflet that has emerged and is now growing. And across the board, you see that on all these tomatoes because we pruned all these tomatoes quite heavily. When you prune a plant, its natural response is to produce more leaves. So if you prune a old diseased leaf, it will produce a new healthier leaf. And if you keep doing that over time, it is actually possible to beat back the disease before it spreads all the way up your plant. So that is why I think it's so important that you regularly prune this. Even right now, what I'm going to do after this is come through and do another pass of lower level pruning, anything that isn't getting light, anything that I don't think is getting airflow. If there's any severe powdery mildew, which I'm sure there is. Oh yeah, like right here, you could see what happens is that the leaves contorts over because this powdery mildew is like suffocating the plant over time. And actually the leaves tend to become kind of brittle. So you could hear it, it's kind of crunchy. It will flake apart like that, very weak. So it's important that you do your pruning, guys. And right here you could see results speak for themselves. The plants will regrow, just make sure you get them plenty of water. So again, guys, pruning tomatoes isn't hard. It doesn't have to be difficult. The only thing you have to remember is to prune any leaves that already have disease, prune any leaves that are too low, that aren't getting any sun, not getting adequate airflow, any leaves below a fruit cluster, that's all fair game. There's no reason to keep it. It's not helping your plants. If anything, it's only hurting them by promoting that disease and allowing it to spread upwards. So if you have any questions, please put them in the comments. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.